All right, at first I just wanted to welcome you all to this workshop series on transferring to a four-year school. My name is Natalie Wilkerson. I'm the Career Center Coordinator here at TCC. And the Career Center provides a lot of different services, and one of them is the Transfer Fair, which will be coming up on February 14th, which is Valentine's Day, and you should have a little brochure in front of you. So this kind of is good timing for you to prep for the schools that are going to be here. I want to also introduce, this is Sam Lofton, and Sam will be giving a bulk of the presentation. He is the University of Washington-Tacoma transfer advisor, but he also is coming to just talk in general about transferring to four-year universities.
All right, thank you, Natalie. How are you guys doing? Good, good. So we have a relatively small group, and I think that's good because it allows us to have more informal discussions about your questions, your intentions in terms of transferring to four-year schools. I just wanted to start off by asking you guys, how many of you are planning to transfer within the next couple of quarters, maybe in the fall quarter? Oh, most of you. Okay, good, good. So it's a good time. And how many of you know which school you're planning to transfer to? Okay, about 2/3 of you guys. That's good. All right, well, we're going to give a general overview of the transfer process today. We're going to talk about factors that you should consider. For those of you that don't know where you're going to transfer to, factors that you should consider when choosing a four-year school, how your credits are going to transfer over, what you should think about in terms of the application process and timelines, and then we're going to just answer any questions that you guys might have throughout the course of the presentation. And let me also say just real quickly that if any of you have questions at any point in time, feel free to raise your hand and interject. Any thoughts, statements, Natalie, if there's anything you want to add, please let me know. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is that it's important to find the school that's right for you. And there's a lot of factors that go into this question about which university you should attend. You're going to be investing a significant amount of time, energy, money into the school that you transfer to and your education there. So you want to make sure that it's a school that's going to fit your needs. Some things to consider: academic interests. If you know which specific major you're planning to pursue, does that four-year school offer that major? Do they have the kinds of courses that you need in order to pursue the kind of career that you're hoping to pursue after graduation? So is it going to propel you towards your long-term academic and career goals? That's the number one question. And if it doesn't, then perhaps you should be looking at it at a different school. If any of you are undecided, one question to ask is how many different majors are offered here? What's the variety, the academic variety? How likely is it that I'll be able to pursue a major or program of study that's interesting to me and that's going to advance me towards my ultimate long-term objectives? For a lot of students, location is important. How close is it to home? How far away from my family and friends? What's the commute time? Certainly these are factors to be considered. Is it urban or a rural environment? How important might that be in terms of what you're pursuing academically and professionally? For example, am I pursuing a degree that requires me to have access to certain certain functions within a large city or an agricultural community, things of that nature? So the location, the proximity to home, the size. Sometimes students ask me, what's the difference between UW-Tacoma and UW-Seattle? And the first thing that comes to mind is UW-T has about 4,000 students and UW-Seattle has about 10 times that many. And so the experience of being a student on the different campuses is quite different. And along with that, you have a different number of resources and buildings and services that are available. Some students love being at a large university where they're, a part of a community of students and they have access to almost unlimited resources. There's a certain energy that's exciting about that, and some students like to be at a smaller school where people tend to perhaps know you a little bit more informally or better, and there's a greater likelihood that you'll be able to strike up a conversation with faculty and staff members because there's fewer students. So what do you envision as the best fit for you? Cost is certainly important, and if you're not thinking about it now, you will be thinking about it when you graduate and have to start paying back those loans. Let me tell you, there is a huge difference between having $30,000 in student loans and $80,000 in student loans. And even though it's not necessarily impacting you directly as a student when you graduate, it has a huge impact. So that's an important consideration as well, especially depending on what you plan to do after you graduate. Some students want to go into careers that perhaps don't have the kind of salary that's going to allow them to pay back $80,000 or $90,000 or $100,000 within a reasonable time frame, and so you should certainly consider costs. Public, private, there's a lot of fine universities in the Tacoma area that are private schools. There's some great ones that are public schools as well. To the extent that that's important to you, how much does that play into it? There are implications of whether a school is public or private, for example, costs and financially and all that stuff, so that's certainly one to be considered. What's it like to be a student at the school that you're going to transfer to? Do they have student organizations? Do they have activities that you can become involved in? For some students, being able to go to things like Pac-12 sporting events, things like that are part of the student experience. Some people would prefer, other kinds of campus activities. So what is it that you're specifically looking for, and to what extent does the school that you're planning to transfer to provide you with those things? Those are important questions that you need to ask. And if you haven't yet spent time at the campus that you intend to transfer to, I strongly encourage you to do that. It's hard to get a sense of what it's like to be a student there without actually going to visit in advance. And I can tell you that any university can, throw some nice pictures on a website and make a campus appear to be friendly and inviting and interesting. But there's no experience like actually being there and seeing it for yourself and thinking about yourself as a student there in a year or 2 years down the road. So definitely spend some time there. Get to know people there if you have former classmates or friends, anyone that you know who's a student there or who has gone there. Try to become as familiar with it as possible so that you're making an informed decision that you're comfortable with once it comes time to actually transfer. Let's see. I want to talk about, so we talked about major considerations. How many majors does the school offer? Are they in areas that are interesting to you? The other thing is, look at the faculty, look at the department. Are there areas of specialization within the major that you need or that are especially appealing to you? For example, I know someone who wants to go into forensic psychology. If you want to pursue a psych degree at a specific university and that's your area of interest, how many courses do they offer that are in line with your ultimate long-term ambitions? Do the faculty have specializations, or are they renowned in that area? If so, that could be a great fit. It could be a great opportunity to learn from someone who's well respected within that field. If not, maybe a different program would be better for you. Here's a good question as well. If you plan to pursue graduate or professional studies, how many of you think about a master's or PhD program? Oh wow, okay, a lot of you. Good. Think about whether the four-year school that you're transferring to offers programs that are going to provide adequate preparation for the master's or graduate programs that you're contemplating. A lot of times graduate programs require a baccalaureate degree, a bachelor's degree in the specific field that you're going into. If you're going to get a master's in sociology, they want a bachelor's in sociology. Sometimes they may not require a bachelor's in that field, but they're going to require a certain number of credits within that field. So perhaps you can have a non-sociology degree as long as you have 30 or more credits within sociology. I, for example, have a master's in English. I don't have a bachelor's degree in English, but I got a minor in English literature, and that was enough that I was able to be admitted into a program. So sometimes you might have graduate programs or doctoral level programs that have very specific requirements, and you should ask yourself, can I complete those admission requirements at the four-year school that I plan to transfer to? how competitive will I be as an applicant if I go to this school? Those are important questions. What do you need to graduate? So there's four main areas, academic credits that you should consider. There's general education requirements, there's major requirements / prereqs, there's graduation requirements, and there's electives. So you guys probably know what general education requirements are. Those are things like humanities and social sciences and composition that you're completing here at TCC. For those of you, how many of you are getting transferable associate's degrees? Most? Okay, just about everybody. That's great. That's really good. That's good for a number of reasons. Number one is that transferable associate's degrees at TCC have those gen ed requirements built into them, so they've already been accounted for. You've already likely satisfied all the gen ed requirements that four-year schools are going to expect. There's a few potential exceptions. One is foreign language. TCC doesn't have a foreign language requirement. A lot of universities, most universities do. Those requirements differ from school to school. Sometimes they can be fulfilled through high school coursework. For example, UW-Tacoma, UW-Seattle will allow you to complete the foreign language requirement if you had 2 or perhaps 3 years. I'm not sure if UW-Seattle is 3 years, but UW-T is 2 years for high school foreign language in the same foreign language. If you did that, then you've satisfied their gen ed requirement for foreign language. Otherwise, you would need to take 2 quarters of a foreign language. So that's the one exception as far as the TCC transferable associate's degrees is concerned. One other exception to think about is if you're planning to transfer to a private school, sometimes they have different general education requirements. Maybe if it's a religious-based school, you might have to take a religious studies or ethics course or something of that nature. Out-of-state schools sometimes have different requirements or stipulations for students. But generally speaking, if you have a transferable associate's degrees, you probably have accounted for all of the gen ed requirements with the possible exception of foreign language. The other nice thing, yeah, go ahead.
Foreign language.
Okay, sure.
UW-T.
Yeah.
Is there a time limit on how far back they go?
Okay, no, there's not a time limit on how far back they go. So if you completed 2 years of foreign language in high school, 15 years ago or 55 years ago, it's fine. You don't have to be proficient. No one's going to quiz you on, speak in a foreign language and ask you to respond. So yeah, that's fine. As long as you completed 2 years of the same language, then you're good as far as UW-Tacoma is concerned. And other schools might have different requirements.
Changed it to a proficiency, so you have to show you're proficient in the first year level of the language. So, but they'll spell it out to you on the website.
Yeah. Usually the websites do a really nice job of outlining what the general education requirements are. So what else are you completing at TCC? You're knocking out the gen ed requirements. Generally, you're also taking care of the major prerequisites, So those of you, for example, that are going into business, you're taking care of the accountings and the economics and the math that's required in business law and all the prereqs for the major. Same with the sciences. Those of you that are going into that, you're taking care of some introductory chemistry here, some intro biology, again, some math. For psychology, you're taking some intro psych and stats and all that stuff. So you're knocking that out. And then you probably are completing some electives at TCC. Almost certainly are. So once you get to the four-year school, if you've got 90 credits from TCC, generally you're going to have 90 more credits, at least at a four-year school that's on the quarter system. And so those 90 credits, of those 90 credits, most of the remaining credits that you're going to need to graduate are going to be major specific requirements. What are some of the majors you guys are thinking about? Yeah.
English.
Okay, English, good, yeah. So you'll probably have at least 60 credits of English coursework, junior and senior level literature classes, or rhetoric and composition courses, things like that. That's generally true. 60 to 70 credits within the major is the general rule. Sometimes it might be a little bit more than that. Some majors might require 70 or 80 or even 90 credits within the major. So that's going to be the entirety of your focus once you get there. But generally it's going to be about 60 to 70 credits. And of the other 20 to 30 credits, that's probably elective coursework. Generally that's what it is. If you're going to pursue a minor at a four-year school, then that other 20 to 30 credits might be the minor coursework. And minors, by the way, are not mandatory. They're not required. They're sort of like mini majors. You know, typically they're 25 to 30 credits within a specific field. Maybe you could get a business minor, or at UWT there's all kinds of minors, nonprofit management and Hispanic studies and, you know, whatever they offer that you're interested in. Again, it's not necessary, it's not required. You could alternately take 20 or 30 credits of coursework in English classes or whatever it is that you want to get your degree in. Maybe coursework that could prepare you for graduate study or doctoral study, something like that. So that's what you're going to have once you transfer over. Graduation requirements tend to be sort of overarching requirements that universities have of all students, like 180 total credits at a four-year school. A lot of times they'll have requirements in terms of how many junior and senior level courses you have to take. It could vary, 45 or 60 is generally what you tend to see. You know, a certain number of credits at that institution. And by the way, while we're on that subject, one other good question to ask, and Natalie prepared a nice handout I think she passed around to you guys that has really good questions to ask of admissions advisors at four-year schools. But one of the things that you'll want to ask is, how many credits can I transfer into your school? Because the number is going to vary sometimes. A lot of schools will allow you to transfer in up to 90 credits, and that's it. So if you have 110 credits at TCC, you know, that's 20 credits that aren't going to go towards your bachelor's degree. But some schools will allow you to transfer in more than 90. And sometimes it's based, that number is based on which degree you're pursuing. For example, and I'll use UW-Tacoma as an example because I work there and I'm very familiar with their degree programs, but you could check majors at other schools too. But for example, at UW-Tacoma, some majors will allow you to transfer in up to 90 credits. Most will allow more than that. Some will allow, business, for example, will allow up to 105 credits. So if you want to complete some additional electives at TCC and save some money, you could do it. You could take 105 credits here and transfer them into the business school. Some majors at UWT will allow you to transfer in up to 112 credits, like social work, and I think there's one or two others that have that number. And then some will allow up to 135 credits, and those are the interdisciplinary arts and sciences programs like English or like history, psychology, you know, those liberal arts-oriented majors. So you could complete a substantial number of credits of elective credits at TCC if you wanted to, beyond the 90 that's required for the transferable associates, and save several $1,000s that way if you were so inclined. And then you would simply be completing the 60 or so major specific credits that are required for your degree at UW-Tacoma. So that's a good question to ask of admissions advisors at any school that you're planning to transfer to. How many credits can I transfer in? If it's 90, and it is at a lot of places, then I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time at TCC beyond the 90 credits that you complete to get the associate's degree. Any questions so far? Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that the college has a specific, because I'll have a lot more than 90 credits when I transfer, but I'm going into English.
Yeah.
So it's not just like a flat 90 credits. It depends on what major you're going into.
It depends on the college and it depends on the major. At UW-Seattle, my understanding is that it's a flat 90 credit rule for all majors. At UW-Tacoma, like I said, it depends on the specific major that you're...
UW doesn't have English, so.
They do, actually. There's a writing studies major, and it has a lot of English and literature courses that are in it. We can talk afterwards if you want to. Yeah. So, yeah.
What if some of the things that you're transferring over go towards like a double major or
Yeah.
a minor?
Good question.
Do they allow those over?
Yeah, so if you're going to get a minor and that minor has courses that are required for your major, then a lot of times you can double dip and apply that same course towards both the major requirements and towards the minor requirements. That's almost always the case. If you're going to get a double major, you can do the same thing at a lot of schools, but you typically have to have additional credits above and beyond the 180 that are required to graduate. And I think the number is typically 45 extra. So instead of having 180 total credits, you'd have 225 total credits upon graduation with 2 degrees.
So if you have like 105 and they only allow 90,
Uh-huh.
but you've got that extra few that could go towards the minor, would they allow that to transfer?
Probably not. If they only allow 90 total credits to transfer in, that's going to be a 90 total that applies towards, any and all requirements there. So you could ask them, but if you're going to a school, if you're transferring to a school that only allows you to transfer 90 credits, I don't think that you'd be able to slip in another 15 or so if you're able to apply those 15 towards a minor. And by the way, typically minor credits are junior and senior level courses that you wouldn't be able to complete at TCC. Sometimes you'll see exceptions to that, like, maybe there's 1 or 2 courses within the minor that you could complete here at a sophomore level, but generally they're junior and senior level courses that we're not going to have. Any other good questions? Any other questions? Let's take a look. Okay, so I mentioned that generally the major requirements are 60 to 70 credits depending on the specific major. Some also have prerequisites that hopefully you're accounting for at TCC so that you can make more efficient use of your time once you get to the 4-year school. This is, Natalie mentioned, you can find this information on their website. So if you're not sure what the prereqs are for an English major or a chemical engineering major at a different school or business or whatever, take a look at their website. Generally, they're spelled out pretty clearly. And if you can't find that information, again, email or call and try to talk to an admissions advisor or an advisor within that department and see, if there are any courses that you need to be accounting for that you haven't already through the transferable associate's degree that you're completing. But take a look, and you can usually find that information on their websites pretty readily. Many have GPA requirements, so if you're going into psychology and you've taken a Psych 100 class at TCC, you probably need a C or better in that Psych 100 class to satisfy the prereq. And then again, the major specific courses are generally junior and senior level courses that you won't be able to complete here at TCC with sometimes a few exceptions. I think we talked about the graduation requirements already, so hopefully you have a pretty good sense of that. And electives, sometimes people ask what are electives, but they're basically any credits that don't apply towards the other sets of requirements that we've already talked about. Gen Ed requirements, major requirements, minor requirements, but credits that you need in order to reach that 180 total in order to graduate. They can usually be taken in any discipline, so if you want to take a bunch of, history or economics courses after completing your major requirements, that's fine. Yeah, and it's a good opportunity to explore courses of interest outside your major. So how are your TCC credits going to transfer over? Most 4-year schools only accept 100 level courses, so if you took pre-college level English or math, those are not going to be accepted by 4-year schools towards the requirements to graduate from that 4-year school. You need to send transcripts of your coursework from every institution you've ever attended. That's even if you attended a place 20 years ago and you only withdrew from your classes, or maybe you had a really bad quarter and you didn't complete any of them satisfactorily, you're still required to send transcripts of all coursework from every institution you've ever attended. When 4-year schools look at your applications and your transcripts, they're going to develop a cumulative transfer GPA that accounts for all of the coursework that you completed at every institution you've attended. So your TCC GPA is specific only to coursework that you've taken here, and you might have a 3.8 from TCC and a 2.4 from another college that you attended 10 years ago. If that's the case, the 4-year schools generally are going to combine them and come up with a cumulative transfer GPA for admissions purposes. And some schools will allow you to substitute or replace a bad grade from a previous institution with a better grade in the same class at TCC, but it has to be the exact same class. And those policies tend to differ from institution to institution. So ask the four-year school that you plan to transfer to what their policy is, if that applies to you. Sometimes I see students who took, a very specific, niche class in, ancient Roman architecture, and it was called maybe Humanities 101 or 115 at their previous institution, and maybe we have a class that looks kind of similar to that, but is not exactly the same. If you were to take that class here, the four-year schools would likely average those two grades instead of replacing the first one with the course that you took here at TCC.
I've taken classes in radio broadcasting.
Oh, okay.
At Clover Park.
Yeah.
Green River.
Okay.
Towards certificates.
Uh-huh.
That have no transferability
Okay.
at all.
Okay.
And they're very specific when they tell you that they don't transfer.
Okay.
Transcripts from those two, or?
Yeah, you should send transcripts from those two. The four-year schools are going to look at those transcripts and determine if there's anything that is transferable. If you took English 101 there, then that's a transferable course and they can apply that. Even if there's nothing transferable, you're still required to send all of those transcripts into four-year schools. So, so keep that in mind. And I think they typically require you to attest or confirm that, affirm that the transcripts that you sent in account for the entirety of your academic record. And so if you make that attestation and then that's not true, then it could be grounds for disciplinary action later. So it's just better to make sure you send it all in now so you don't have to worry about any sorts of things happening later on. Yeah.
When you talked about replacing grades,
Uh-huh.
About 10 years ago, I was at WSU
Okay.
and I did an English 101 course there.
Mhm.
And I didn't try that hard and didn't do that well.
Mm-hmm.
I've retaken the course
Mhm.
English 101 here.
Okay.
For the A.
Nice.
Can I do something about that grade 10 years ago because it's the English 101?
Yeah, so WSU is not going to do anything about that grade. It's not going to disappear from your WSU transcript or anything like that. But when you transfer or when you apply to a four-year school and they see both of those transcripts, some four-year schools are going to only count the English 101 grade from TCC. That's what UW-Tacoma would do.
Okay.
Other schools might
Is that
average
a
them.
form that I would send in asking?
No.
No, so it's just, it's up to the school.
Yeah, it's up to the school, and their evaluators will take a look and they'll see, okay, she repeated English 101 or Intro to Composition. Even if it was English, 125 at WSU and was 101 here, the number doesn't really matter. What they're looking for is the content of the class, and if it's the same, if it appears to be identical, then they'll count the higher grade. Yeah.
When we send in a transcript, do we have to send like high school transcript?
Good question. It depends on the institution's policy. Some schools require high school transcripts. I talked to a student yesterday who is almost done with his associate's degree and is applying to a four-year school out of state that's requiring that he send high school transcripts, and he was kind of confounded by that. He's completed all this coursework here and done really well. Why do they care about high school transcripts? I believe that UW-Seattle does that. Not all four-year schools are going to require that. UW-Tacoma, for example, is not going to require any high school transcripts or SAT, ACT scores if you've completed 45 or more college-level transferable courses at TCC or anywhere else.
So some schools do take the standardized test score?
Some schools are still going to want to see those. Yeah, they're still going to want to see those. And you should ask them, if they require them, to what extent do they factor into the decision-making process that those schools engage in when they review your applications. How important are they in terms of your admissibility? I mean, if you have a 3.5 here and have done really well at TCC, but maybe weren't quite as serious in high school, or your records prior to TCC don't reflect that, are you going to be penalized for that? I mean, those are good things to know. Yeah.
How typically do the schools want those transcripts? Mail them to your house and then you submit them, or do they need to go in and seal them up to the school?
Good question.
From 4 different schools?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Good question. Yeah. So either one is fine. typically four-year schools receive transcripts from other institutions directly from those schools, and a lot of the community colleges in Washington can send your transcripts electronically to four-year schools. So if you're planning to apply to UW or Western or Central or wherever, just have TCC's Enrollment Services Office send those transcripts directly to those schools. They can do it electronically. There's a nominal fee for it. Alternately, if that's not a possibility, or if you just want, to hold it and to hand it in to somebody, then we can give you a hard copy, and four-year schools will accept that as well, as long as it's in a sealed envelope and that seal has not been broken. Once the seal is broken, then it becomes an unofficial transcript. So, yeah. So either one is fine.
But what if your high school don't have your transcript 4 years ago?
High schools are required to maintain transcripts, and if they don't, then there is a state database where they're required to submit them to. So someone has them. I would start with your high school. It's 98% certain that they have your transcript, and if not, then they can tell you where to obtain them. Yeah. Any other questions about this? Let's see. All right. Okay, we talked about all this stuff, gen ed requirements. Okay, yeah, so other things that you should do to make a successful transition to four-year school. In terms of making sure that you're successful once you leave TCC and go somewhere else, one of the most important things is that you get involved in some way, that you get to know your future classmates, staff members, professors. A lot of researchers have found that students who are involved in their campus in some way tend to be more likely to graduate and tend to have higher grades, higher GPAs. And it's because you're more invested and you're more supported at your four-year schools when you do those things. So find a way to get involved, to be actively involved in your education at the school, to be involved in the campus community. I think that's the best advice I can give. Make sure that you give yourself the opportunity to be successful your first quarter. It's a transition going to a four-year school and having newfound expectations. Sometimes the expectations are a little bit higher, although TCC does a great job of preparing students to transfer over. So if you've done well here, you're going to do just fine when you do transfer. But especially that first quarter, it's a transition process. You're learning new people, new places, in some cases new levels of expectations. And I think it's good to give yourself the opportunity to be successful and maybe go a little bit lighter on your credit load your first quarter until you get into your comfort zone, and can start really, taking the number of credits that you feel is appropriate to graduate within your time frame. Any specific questions you guys have about the transfer process that you were hoping to discuss today? Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know how that can count. Do I count as an international student or transfer student? I don't know how that works.
If you're an international student here, four-year schools are likely to consider you to be an international transfer student. And so sometimes there are special application processes for international students. And you want to make sure that you talk to someone in the International Student Affairs Office, or look at the website. A lot of times they highlight what additional application pieces might be necessary for international students, and you can ascertain that just from looking over the website. But I think it's always good to have a contact person at the school that you can talk to, and just make sure that you're accounting for all the steps that are required. Yeah. And I'm glad that you asked that question, because it makes me think about other application deadlines and processes that you should be mindful of. Keep in mind, especially for those of you that are planning to transfer in the fall quarter, that typically the application deadlines are, in the middle of the winter quarter, or maybe at the beginning of the spring. In other words, right around now. So check out the application deadlines at the four-year schools that you're applying to. If you haven't applied yet, I would look at them today or sometime before the weekends, because at a number of schools, we're coming right upon them. For UW-Tacoma, it's March 15th if you want to start in the fall. For UW-Seattle, it's earlier than that. I'm not sure if it's February 15th or February 1, but it's sometime around like right now. So hopefully you've applied if the application deadline has already passed us, but if not, I would take a look at that for all schools that you're considering. Yeah.
I hope we done instead of fall in the winter.
Uh-huh.
Because some foreign languages.
Yeah, yeah.
So, do most of the 4 years offer like a spring enrollment? I mean, is that?
Good question. Yeah, so a lot of schools will allow you to enter any quarter. Some schools will only allow for fall or maybe fall and winter, but not spring. And sometimes it depends on your major. You know, there are some major programs that accept students as part of a cohort. So they'll admit like 20 or 30 students every year to matriculate through their classes together. And typically when that happens, those students start in the fall quarters. And so if you're planning, for example, at UW-Tacoma, if you're planning to do social work or healthcare leadership, you have to start in the fall. For other majors, you can start fall or winter. Business, for example, is fine. For interdisciplinary arts and sciences like English, you could start fall, winter, or spring. At UW-Seattle, I think it's fall and winter, but I'm not 100% certain of that.
Are most 4-year schools on semesters?
In Washington and, well, in Western Washington anyway, we tend to be on the quarter system. Same with Oregon, OSU, and U of O. But outside of Washington State, the majority are on the semester system. Yeah, there's a few here and there that are on the quarter system. Most of them have it backwards, though. I'm just kidding. I think you had your hand up first, and then we'll go here.
The application process, deadline's March 15th, transcripts,
Yeah, yeah.
you're dependent on a school from Milwaukee.
Yeah. That's why, number one, it's important to contact them early. And number two, if it looks like the school in Milwaukee or wherever isn't going to be able to send those transcripts in a timely manner, despite your continued persistence that it has to be in, then talk to the four-year school that you're applying to and let them know that the application is in, the transcript from TCC is in, but there's one other transcript that you're waiting on, and you'll get it to them ASAP. And hopefully they'll be willing to work with you. I know at UW-Tacoma they give you a grace period. If your application is in, but the transcripts are still outstanding, they'll give you another week or a couple of weeks. They'll try to work with you. And a lot of four-year schools do the same thing. The other thing is that typically when you're applying to a four-year school and you've got this collection of data that you need to send in, the application, transcripts, sometimes essays and letters of recommendation for some schools. As soon as you send anything in, they'll open a file for you, and that file will remain open until they have everything that they need to review your application. So start sending stuff in, right away. You don't have to worry about waiting until you have it all together and you can send it all in together at the same time. Send in whatever you can right now as quickly as you can, and then send in the other pieces as you obtain those application pieces. The other thing I was going to mention, then I'll get to your question, is that in many cases it is helpful to apply early. I would check and see if there's a rolling admissions process, or if it might impact your application to apply a month or 2 months before the application deadline. Many times you can do that, and you might have a slightly higher chance of admission if you apply early. For UW-Tacoma, you can be considered for transfer priority scholarships for fall quarter if you apply by February the 15th, even though the app deadline is March 15th. So if you have a high GPA and you're going to be competitive for transfer scholarships, send in the application. You don't have to submit any additional materials. They'll automatically consider you for those scholarships by virtue of your application. So that's another good question to ask the representatives from schools when you see them on the 14th, or maybe you want to call them up because those deadlines are approaching like right now. Yeah, what was, you had a question?
Are there any quarters where they take higher priority over transfer students and have a higher rate of admittance over freshmen?
I don't think so. Generally, schools will admit a certain percentage of their incoming students, overall incoming students, as transfer students or as freshmen, and that percentage, well, a lot of times they'll admit freshmen in the fall. They'll focus on freshmen in the fall, or maybe fall and winter. And so new students that are coming in the spring are going to be transfer students. But I don't know that you generally have a higher likelihood of admission if you apply as a transfer student in the fall, winter, or spring relative to other quarters. There might be fewer applicants in the spring for spring admission than there are for fall admission, but they're probably, if they're admitting students for spring, they're probably admitting fewer of those applicants. So the general likelihood of admission remains about the same, you know. And sometimes schools will share with you what data they look at, you know. What's the median GPA for admitted students? Do they have a cutoff point? Or what other factors do they look at when they're evaluating applications? A lot of times it comes down to the GPA, any prereqs for your major. Those are especially important, obviously. And then they'll look pretty closely at the personal statement or essays that you write. Sometimes students think that those are, you know, just sort of these ancillary requirements that no one really pays that close of attention to, but that's really not the case. Four-year schools want to see how well you're able to write, how well you're able to defend whatever propositions you're stipulating, and so they're going to look at those pretty closely and try and get a sense of your abilities and effectiveness as a writer. So make sure that you give your time and attention to those. Have someone give you some feedback, maybe the writing center or someone else. That's important. The other thing I was going to mention is, while we're on this general theme of the application process, is that you should also keep in mind that some majors have additional specific application requirements that are above and beyond what is required to apply to the four-year school. So this is another good question to ask admissions advisors. It's kind of a common refrain. You know, what do I need to complete my application to the university, and what do I need to do to complete my application to this specific major? And sometimes that's going to be two different sets of materials. Maybe the application pieces for the major are above and beyond what's required for admission to the university. For example, letters of recommendation, or additional essays, maybe short answer essays, things like that. Sometimes you're going to find that you can be considered for admission to a major by virtue of your application to the university, and you just simply have to stipulate which major you're intending to pursue. Other times there are going to be additional application materials. At UW-Tacoma, there's additional application materials for business students, for social work students, for healthcare leadership students, for a variety of folks. And then there's not additional application requirements for other students, like writing majors or English majors. So, it's a little bit easier for you than it is for a business student in that regard. So, you always want to make sure that if you have to submit additional application materials for your major, that you know what those are and that you actually do submit them within the timelines that are required. Otherwise you could be admitted to the university but not to the major that you want to pursue, in which case you're going, what am I going to take?
Do they not know what they're going to major in here? Or does everybody pretty much have a good idea? Have you done research on the occupations that are in line with the major also? Because if you haven't done that, I do have some good resources here at the Career Center that we could look up the different majors and the occupations that are related to that major and what they are making currently within Washington State, and if it's something that's actually on the incline or decline as a career. So that's a resource that you could utilize, and I'd be happy to help you walk through that or show you that resource too. So. Okay, so it is in Building 7, and it is as you see the big orange arrow, the Career Center is to the right. It's the brown wall, and it says Career Center, and it has like
15 computers there. It's a large center to the right in Building 7. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I mean, you always want to. Those are great questions too. You know, what can I do with this major? What do recent graduates? What have they done with the major? What's the employment? What are the employment prospects? You know, yeah, these are all great things to consider. Better to think about them now than when you're graduating. You know.
Now's the perfect time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is it wise to send in transcripts before you apply?
Good question. So you could send in transcripts before the actual application, and they'll. No, well, hopefully not. Hopefully they're not going to get lost, and they'll receive those transcripts, and they'll assume that there's going to be an application that's forthcoming. Generally speaking, when you apply to university, I mean, they're definitely going to require transcripts, and they're definitely going to require an application, but you're also going to want to send in a final transcript after you've completed all of your courses at TCC. So for example, if you're applying to a university that has an application deadline of February 15th or March 15th, you're going to be submitting transcripts before you have your winter quarter grades, and certainly way before you have your spring quarter grades. Let's assume that you get accepted to where you apply to, which I'm sure all of you will. At that point, they're not going to have your final grades for your last 2 quarters, and so you're going to need to send in those transcripts in order to make sure that you're getting credit for those courses that apply towards your degree. One other thing I wanted to mention, just as a follow-up over here, you mentioned that you've got some foreign language courses that you're working on right now. A lot of these gen ed requirements, like foreign language, are graduation requirements from the 4-year school, not admission requirements. So if you've completed 90 credits, let's say hypothetically that you're applying to a 4-year school that only accepts 90 transfer credits, and you're going to have all of those credits completed except for foreign language, go ahead and transfer there. They'll admit you, and then you can complete the foreign language at that university. For UW-T, for English majors, that doesn't apply because they'll accept 100 credits or 120 credits.
That's what I'm worried about.
Mm-hmm.
Have more than
Yeah.
not more than 90 because of my
Yeah.
other transfers too.
Yeah.
Especially because I want to do my foreign languages and stuff here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
That's a bit of a conundrum, you know. Yeah. What are the advantages of taking foreign language here versus the disadvantages of not being able to apply that credit towards your bachelor's degree? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Saw a hand here, and then we'll get yours.
So I'm also interested in English major.
Oh, yeah.
UW-T do have English
Yeah.
major, but like when you graduate, graduate from your bachelor's degree,
Mm-hmm.
would our certificate say that you majored in English or that some other academic?
So typically, you know, it's going to have like a bachelor's of arts or a bachelor's of science in English or in writing studies or in history, whatever your degree is in. So that's what the degree will say. It will say Bachelor of Arts in Writing Studies from UW-Tacoma because that's the technical name for the major. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I'm going to be done this winter quarter.
Okay.
When I'll have my associates
Yeah.
and everything like that.
Uh-huh.
So when I send in my application, because I don't think mine's due until March.
Yeah.
But I think it's the beginning of March. I get that application in. I still send my transcripts in, or can I let them know, hey, I'm completely done.
Yeah. If the application is due at the beginning of March, you're not going to have your winter quarter grades in. I'm sure they're going to want to see a transcript, so you're going to want to send something in, unless they give you some additional time to get your winter quarter grades and then submit your transcript, so you can only submit 1 instead of 2. But in all likelihood, you're going to submit your transcripts by that deadline, whatever the deadline is, March 1, March 15. And then you're going to resubmit the transcript once you get your grades. I know it sounds kind of frustrating, but they're going to need to see your transcripts by the application deadline unless they give you an extension. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, UW-Tacoma,
Yeah,
that's my plan.
okay.
Right now, at this point where I'm at, the application has been turned in.
Mhm.
There's someone there, an advisor that
Mhm.
you can make an appointment with. If you know
Mhm.
you're not a student,
Mhm.
you can go in there and sit down and talk with them and get head in the right direction.
You can meet with admissions advisors. You can meet with an admissions advisor for UW-Tacoma. That would be me. That's what I do when I'm at UW-Tacoma's campus, and I can do that here at TCC as well. Generally, we're not going to help you register for classes at UW-Tacoma. That's something you'll do like at the orientation, and that's generally the same procedure for all universities. So once you apply and you're admitted, you're going to get a packet that has a congratulatory letter, welcome to the class of 20, whatever. And they're going to have orientation information. You can sign up for that. You will go to the orientation, learn about the university, meet with an advisor there, and hopefully sign up for classes or learn how to sign up for classes once that process becomes available to you.
Yeah, it was the admissions part that I was.
Oh, okay.
asking
Yeah.
about, so
Yeah.
I didn't know that if you could actually make an appointment with someone there on campus to.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we can talk afterwards if you want to. Yeah. Good questions. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Is there any common requirements for out-of-state schools?
For out-of-state schools, I would check with that specific university and see what other requirements they might have. Again, the requirements tend to vary. The processes might be a little bit different. So it's especially important, I think, to check with an admissions advisor at an out-of-state university because they're likely to be less familiar with our transcripts as well. So it's good to make sure that you've got all of your application requirements accounted for and that you've taken the right courses here to be admissible to the school. Other questions? You guys have been a great crowd.
Yeah.
Natalie, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to encourage you all to come to the transfer fair, on February 14th. And so we have 31 schools that are going to be there. And for the most part of the schools that I heard, they are going to actually be here at TCC. So if you have some specific questions for like Seattle University or SPU or PLU or UW-T or UW-Seattle, those schools will be present there. I sent out an email, it's in your inbox today, detailing all the different schools that will be there. And take a chance, look over some of these questions, maybe pick out a few to ask. If you don't know which school you're going to, just take your time. And if you don't know exactly what you're going into, I hope you'll come over to the Career Center or have a chat with Sam. We're over in Building 7 at the other end. So thanks for coming. If you have any other questions, yes. Oh, time. I'm sorry. It's 10 to 1, and it's in the hallway. You can't miss it. It's huge. So, yeah, it's a really.
I have my card for anyone that wants my card.
I don't.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, guys.